Today, I want to talk about Xbox and their broader place within the gaming landscape as we see them in 2024 and what it means specifically for PlayStation and Nintendo Switch/Switch 2 owners. As we know, as Nintendo fans, we are approaching the end of the current Nintendo Switch's life cycle we are in today, and we also know that Microsoft has already recently made a push to bring over select first-party Microsoft-owned titles to the Switch and some to PS5. We have Pentiment and Grounded now available on Nintendo Switch, and Microsoft even had to come out and do a press briefing ahead of the announcement of these games, supposedly being the reason for the delay of the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase that we saw happen in February, because Microsoft wanted to communicate with its fan base that, hey, we're not going third party altogether. We're not going to bring all of our first party content to other consoles, although we are going to do it with 4 particular titles. And of course, we now know the games in question were indeed Hi-Fi Rush, Pentiment, Sea of Thieves, and Grounded. And if you watch that Xbox podcast update, you would know that Phil Spencer and team were trying to do a lot of damage control within the Xbox fan community and reassure fans that these 4 games were all they were looking at bringing multi-platform, and it really didn't signal a big shift from their strategy of releasing their own first-party content exclusive to Xbox and PC going forward, like we see them do today with things like Game Pass, where you can pretty much pick up your Xbox titles on either PC or Xbox and enjoy them just the same day one with a lot of their first-party studios. But there were still some rumors and rumblings behind the scenes from major media outlets suggesting that Microsoft might actually have a broader plan in place to bring many of their games multi-platform, not just PlayStation 5, but also Nintendo Switch and Switch 2. I think the reason that Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves aren't being brought to the current Switch we have today is just because Microsoft's going to sit on those games and save them for Switch 2. We got the 2 games ported to Switch out of the 4 that are the most simple when it comes to the scope of the games and the visual fidelity and things like that. So there's no reason to think that Microsoft isn't going to at least bring those games over to Switch 2. But now there are some reports that could suggest that a much broader chunk of Microsoft's entire first-party games lineup could be going to PlayStation 5, and I would personally argue Nintendo Switch 2 as well once we learn about that hardware. And we have to first get on the same page with all of this information by hopping over to VGC and reading through their detailed typed-up article together. Some publishers reportedly questioning support for Xbox amid flatlining sales. Microsoft is planning to bring the majority of Xbox games to PS5 at some point, it's also claimed. That's according to GamesIndustry.biz head Chris Dring, who said his takeaway from GDC last week was that he thinks Xbox is in real trouble as a hardware manufacturer. The other thing I heard it from a very prominent company, and not one so prominent, was Xbox's performance in Europe is just flatlining, he said. You can follow our monthly coverage in the games market and you can see that Xbox sales are falling, and it's been falling all throughout last year, and it's falling even harder this year. The phrase one major company who released a big game last year was, "I don't know why we bothered supporting it." We mentioned on a previous podcast that we heard retailers in Europe are considering or had already been cutting back their Xbox stock on their shelves, hardware, games, that kind of thing. And now you've got third-party publishers going, we're putting a lot of effort into trying to create a Series S version and a Series X version of a game, when, to be honest with you, for us, the market is PC and PS5. Last year, Microsoft admitted to having lost the console wars after consistently ranking third behind PlayStation and Nintendo in terms of sales since entering the market with the original Xbox in 2001. PS5 had outsold the Xbox Series X and S by around 2-1 globally as the end of 2023, according to data shared by Grand Theft Auto publisher Take-Two. And in February, Microsoft delivered an Xbox business update which confirmed reports that it's planning to bring more first-party games to PlayStation or Switch in the form of Pentiment, Hi-Fi Rush, Sea of Thieves, and Grounded. Microsoft has also reportedly weighed up the idea of releasing Gears of War, Microsoft Flight Simulator, the next Doom game, Starfield, and Indiana Jones for rival consoles, and boss Phil Spencer recently told The Verge, "I don't think we should as an industry ever rule out a game going to any other platform." Dring continued, and with Xbox putting some of the games on PS5, from what I understand, the majority of them will be coming across at some point. Assuming it progresses as Xbox believes it probably will, I think Xbox is in real trouble as a hardware manufacturer, and that was the thing that came out of GDC for me. He added, "I thought it would be fine, but then I didn't really factor in that some developers and publishers might go, yeah, I don't know, is there any point? And that is when you can lose it." So this is honestly an interesting development to see Xbox face within the gaming industry, because it seemed like just 6 months ago or less when we were talking about the proposition of the Activision Blizzard merger finally closing for Microsoft, that it might catapult them ahead significantly within the console market. And the big argument was that, are they going to be a monopoly in the gaming space because of just how many first-party game studios they will now have under the Xbox brand and umbrella, and will they make all that stuff exclusive? Well, we know Microsoft did a lot to fight off those claims. They signed a 10-year legal binding agreement with Nintendo, PlayStation, and just about anybody else out there that sells games, that their mega franchise Call of Duty will be supported with content parity on rival platforms for the next 10 years, and that's a guarantee. Other series were talked about as being supported cross-platform, but we knew Microsoft would pick off some singular series to go ahead and keep as an exclusive, as a reason for you to go justify as the consumer to pick up the Xbox brand and play on Game Pass. And if you can play the games on any platform, but it's just Game Pass maybe is a cheaper avenue to play the games, you're going to miss out on a large chunk of the user base that's still going to want to purchase their games physically anyway, because they're just not at the point where they want everything to be digital on a streaming service. Yeah, the next generation of gamers might grow up and not feel the same way about needing to own games. There's a large percentage of the gaming market today that plays on console that wants to own their stuff, and they don't want to just have it ripped away from an ongoing subscription service like Game Pass, where sometimes games are in the service and then they expire, just like Netflix or any streaming service that you see content added in, you also see it removed. So if your big selling point of that service is available on the other consoles, it really stops and makes consumers ask the question, why would I go spend a dedicated $300 or $500 for your flagship series console to be able to play on your platform and ecosystem? And that's where I think we are at a very pivotal point for Microsoft's business going forward, because with the amount of game studios that they now own, they could easily decide to pivot to go ahead and sell to as many users as possible and come out with games day and date or shortly thereafter they release on their own flagship consoles, and then they're ported to PS5 and Switch and ultimately Switch 2. I personally think that, as somebody who keeps up primarily with Nintendo news around here, that we will see a lot of these games hit from Microsoft first-party studios when the Switch 2 is out. They need a more capable console. A lot of the rumors from the dev kits and kind of the PC targeted spec hardware that has supposedly been shown off for Nintendo Switch 2 behind the scenes so far ranks it somewhere in the realm of a PS4 Pro, all the way to maybe competing with a Series S in handheld mode, and potentially as powerful as something like a Series S when in docked mode. If that is the case, that would allow a lot of Microsoft support to go ahead and come over to a presumably a very large audience that Nintendo will no doubt go secure with the successor to their extremely historically successful console that is the Switch today. And I think games like Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves are already shoo-ins. We already know that Call of Duty is a done deal and will be coming to Switch/Switch 2. And then the question becomes, do we start to see projects like Starfield, Indiana Jones, and other massive first-party Microsoft franchises ported over? Do we get Halo and all of the history of that series all brought over to PlayStation and Nintendo Switch 2? Can you imagine being able to play through Microsoft's biggest marquee franchise that they are known for from back in the day? The big reason you went out and bought an Xbox was Halo back in the early days of 01 and onwards. And is that now playable on PlayStation and Nintendo Switch? It's like saying, can you imagine playing Mario on PlayStation 5? It's kind of that crazy of a statement. Maybe not quite as crazy, because Nintendo's always done their own thing and have been a company that highly values exclusivity, clearly. But Microsoft is going through a major shift here, and it's going to have massive ripples across the entire gaming industry. And whether you're a PlayStation owner, a Nintendo console owner, or an Xbox console owner, you're going to see potentially some games that would have never been in the conversation to come to your console before now be there at or soon after launch. And while it might ultimately be the downfall of Microsoft producing hardware in a big way or having any kind of notable market share that plays on the Xbox ecosystem of devices, they might be okay with that if they go out and make that much more revenue off of the games, and they're getting a 30% plus kickback on everything that is sold from their games on the PlayStation and Nintendo platforms. And as long as you're feeding into their revenue stream, they're a for-profit company. They're going to be happy at the end of the day. So we'll have to wait and see what unfolds with all of this. But my takeaway from this story, if true, Microsoft may be heavily considering going the way of a software-first company, hardware being an afterthought for a while. Granted, this will be further off. Of course, we already know Microsoft is going to launch a next-generation console, as they said that in their business update podcast. We just don't know the scope at which they will push this console and whether or not they're going to have a ton of exclusive games for it, or if they will just treat it kind of like a Microsoft branded PC and pick up the games here if you want to buy this machine. But if you don't want to buy this machine, well, you can still play our games anywhere that there's a console that supports it available, and we don't care if that's Sony, we don't care if that's Nintendo, you can go play on the platform of your choice. We could be at that point sometime in the foreseeable future for Microsoft. And while that would be kind of a sad day for me in the gaming history, I would love to see more Microsoft games. I also don't want to see them go away as a console manufacturer, just for maybe nostalgia reasons more than anything. I really have enjoyed each Xbox console that has released over the course of history, but we'll have to wait and see how this ultimately all unfolds. But I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your personal thoughts and opinions on these reports that suggest that Microsoft could be heavily considering bringing all of their first-party content to all consoles, and maybe even the conversation of them not putting as much focus on hardware, period. Do you buy into these reports, and do you think they're accurate? Do you think third parties will ultimately be their downfall and say it's not even worth it to make a Series X and S version of our games, so we start to see a lot of that support pull away from the consoles, and that's ultimately what does Microsoft in? Or do you think that maybe there really is a different rebuilding strategy, and we might see them support some of their first-party titles on other consoles for a limited time to generate some additional revenue, but then they'll turn around and make things like that exclusive again as they gain more market share and potentially secure a broader audience with Game Pass? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch the video on screen next if you haven't already. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.